Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Justin Rombough podcast. I'm joined with my father again as we are going to preview this upcoming college football season. So, to start, how has the college football playoff format changed for this upcoming season?
Well, thank you for asking me again, Justin, for the third time now on these podcasts. And that the playoffs, of course, are now a 12-team playoff, and it's pretty unique because we have teams hosting it. For the early games are hosted by the 5 seed through the 5, 6, 7, and 8 seeds, the higher seeded team going up against the 12, 11, 10, and 9, respectively, in their home field. And they don't have to pick their home field, those teams that are higher seeded. They can actually pick a neighboring stadium if they want. It is their choice. They would play, each of those would play into the next round, and those are actual bowl games. The Fiesta Bowl will take the winner of the Big 12, and the Peach Bowl will take the winner of the ACC, and the Rose Bowl takes the winner of the Big 10, and the Sugar Bowl takes the winner of the SEC. And determined who gets those bowls seeded is the ranking of that team that gets it. For example, say if Georgia wins the SEC and is ranked number 1 in the nation, they would be the number 1 seed. If, say, Ohio State were ranked 2nd in the nation and they're in the Rose Bowl, that would be the 2 seed. Say the Peach Bowl would be like, say, Florida State. If they're ranked 3rd, they would be the 3 seed. And say the Big 12 champs, say Oklahoma State or something is ranked 4th, or whatever their ranking is relative to each other, they would be the 4 seed, something like that. Of course, and then the at-large berths are the ones that, second place or lower. Plus, there's 3 teams, Notre Dame, Washington State, and Oregon State, that can go. But since they aren't competing for a conference championship, if their record is good enough, they can get one of those 4 early round games. They can't compete for a conference title, so they get seeded 5 down to 11. Now, 12 seed goes to the group of 5 teams. When you got the Sun Belt, the Conference USA, the American, the MAC, and the Mountain West teams. There's quite a lineup of teams there. Most people are predicting either Memphis or Boise State or Liberty to make the that 12th seed. Again, there's plenty of others. In MAC, you could have Miami of Ohio or Northern Illinois, possibly Appalachian State or James Madison, something like that. In the Sun Belt, maybe Tulane again. In the American, they played USC, remember, 2 years ago in the Cotton Bowl. So there's some possibilities there with some various G5 teams. The highest rated of all those will get in. Liberty went last year and played Oregon in the Fiesta Bowl and those new NY6 bowls. But this year they will actually get the 12th seed. So they'll have to go up against the 5 seed, and that team will probably be somebody like Alabama. If they lose to like Georgia, they could be like 13-1. So they would really have quite a time going up against the 5 seed. And one other big problem is they're in their home field, so if, say, like Arizona or Miami or something like that has to play like Michigan on the road in December, that would make quite a tough time for these Sun Belt teams. However, in Michigan's case, since Detroit, is just east of Ann Arbor, they could opt to play at Ford Field there where the Lions play, which is a domed stadium. So obviously it would be a big help rather than having to sit through 4 hours in probably sub-freezing temperatures, particularly with these Sun Belt teams. So, again, this is a new thing in the playoffs when they have home field. And much like a lot of people use the analogy of the Green Bay Packers in the NFL, if they got a high seed in the NFC, these teams going to Lambeau Field in January, which is even colder than December, really have to deal with some adverse weather conditions. So that's the big key thing on these first rounds is the weather in that and who gets seeded there based on their records in that, and then go into the second round against all those bowls, and whoever wins all that gets down to the Orange and Cotton Bowls, and that's your final 4, and then they play in January 9th and 10th, again, the winners of all those games, and then the national championship game in Atlanta the 20th. So it's a month long, because these early games start December 20th, and they end January 20th, so it is a marathon. It's all month. So it's basically not, Christmas is supposed to be nice, relaxing, enjoying time. This is a marathon. It's basically a part-time job for everybody, fans included, as far as getting to these places. If they could go to 3 or 4 games, depending how their teams do. It's going to be pretty exhausting, but again, It makes it more fair. We have more teams and avoid the controversy of past years where teams are getting left out. With this many teams, nobody's going to get left out. And the teams that don't make it, there's plenty of bowls. They'll still get a postseason game. We still include a whole list of bowls that all the conferences can go to. Even all those G5 have several bowls too. So everybody's going to get a piece of the action, and a lot of teams will have a shot at the national championship. It's going to be very exciting. And a lot of chances to play new teams. Say like an Arizona could play like Tennessee or Ole Miss in a first round game, and that usually they would never play a team like that far away, and they usually play Western teams in a bowl, rarely play a Southern. But since the SEC and the Big Ten are projected to have a lot of picks or a lot of bids in this, they could play teams like Michigan and Ohio State and say Ole Miss and teams like that where they're far away, including in their place. So we could have to go back to Knoxville or Oxford or somewhere like that for a game. So again, new places. It's going to be very exciting in that. And again, all the way down to the Final Four and then the championship game at the end of the month in January. And of course, the kids will probably be out of school in these early round games, so they won't have the student sections because most of the finals are usually the week before, like the 14th, and the first game's like the 20th. So the students will be out. So again, the student sections will probably be open to everybody then. So it'll be a little bit different than a regular season game. And of course, the elements will make a big difference too, especially in those early rounds. But it should be a lot of fun. And see who gets the bids. And again, the Big 12 may only get one bid. There's a lot of good teams there. The ACC maybe only one. And Notre Dame probably will get one. So, and you had the G5, that's 4 already. And if the Big 10 and the SEC get 4 each, there's your 12 teams. So it's really going to be something to get that bid. Say for the Big 12, who's going to get it? And there's like 7, 8 teams in the Big 12 that have a legitimate chance of being that one team. And again, all the other conferences, very similar, 7, 8 teams, all of them could go. And so it's going to be really exciting as the bowl predictions come as each week. There's projections already now as the season goes along as to see how it lines up and what teams go where. And so it'll be really exciting as the season goes along, and I'm sure everybody is looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think like you mentioned, the added wrinkle of adding the Group of 5 team as the 12th seed, I think will keep from controversy as we've had in recent years, especially with the 4-team playoff. There was a lot of teams that felt like they got stiffed out of an opportunity. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that shapes up. Looking forward now to this season, I was thinking we could do a little preview on each conference. So to start us off with the ACC, who do you have winning the ACC this upcoming season?
There's some really good teams. I've got Florida State winning it, but Clemson is really going to give them quite a time. Those two, they might get both of them in the playoffs. They, of course, have a tremendous rivalry, and they might squeeze 2 in. But those two are going to really battle it out. And I think Miami and North Carolina State, some even have them penciled in to go to the playoffs too. So, again, all 4 very strong teams, and maybe Louisville and Virginia Tech, and they're behind them. But I'm going to go Florida State, but it should be a fun, competitive league for the ACC.
Yeah, I would have to agree. So for me, I think Florida State's it's their conference to win. I think Clemson, obviously they haven't had the success like they had early in the 2010s and 2020s, but I think with them not utilizing the portal, that kind of opens up a little bit of opportunity for like a Miami to win or Florida State. And I think in terms of the transfer portal for the ACC, Cam Ward, we saw a lot of last year in the Pac-12 at Washington State, is now at Miami, a Heisman candidate potentially. DJU from Oregon State, another Pac-12 alum, is at Florida State. Clemson, like I mentioned, they didn't utilize the portal that much, if at all. Miami also picked up, along with Cam Ward from Washington State, they picked up Oregon State's running back, Damian Martinez. So, the portal, I think, is obviously a huge thing in college sports. As we look forward in our preview, we're going to see a lot of the main guys this season are going to be from the transfer portal. Some games that I thought were of note to watch in the ACC, Clemson and Georgia open up the season August 31st. That's a huge game if Clemson can upset Georgia. Obviously, Georgia is going to be on the quest to win their 3rd championship in 4 seasons. Clemson's going to be at Florida State. Like you mentioned, a big rivalry. Florida State at Miami. Florida State at Notre Dame, and Florida versus Florida State. Obviously, there's going to be a big rivalry week at the end of November. There's a bunch of games that we'll get to. And the thing I took of note looking at all these conferences, the ACC now has 17 teams, with Cal, Stanford, SMU being newcomers. It's really weird seeing these conferences with 16-plus teams. I can't really get used to it. But, yeah, do you have any closing thoughts for the ACC before we move on?
No, not really. Those are all games. Clemson, of course, is in western South Carolina there, and Georgia's in Athens, so they're really close geographically, and they've played each other many times. It's a big non-conference game, but they are really close there, and of course those ones close by are always big rivals, and that should be a real shootout.
So moving ahead for the Big Ten, now they have 18 teams, which is so crazy to me. For them, I would say for me, I really have loved what Ohio State's done this offseason. Chip Kelly is now their offensive coordinator for Ryan Day's staff. Will Howard, the quarterback, transfer from Kansas State. They have the best backfield in the country with Judkins, a transfer from Ole Miss, and Travion Henderson. Plus, they have one of the best freshmen in the country, big star, 5-star receiver Jeremiah Smith. He could be the best true freshman in the country. Additionally, Oregon, Dylan Gabriel, they were able to pick him up from Oklahoma. We were able to kind of skate by against them in the Alamo Bowl because he was sitting out because of his transfer to Oregon. Michigan, different coach. Harbaugh's off to the NFL, so they will be a new-look team. Probably will look similar, but they got a different guy at head coach with a lot of the players having gone to the NFL, J.J. McCarthy, Roman Wilson. And then Penn State, can they finally get over the hump and defeat Ohio State and Michigan? I guess we'll have to find out. USC, will they take a step back without Caleb Williams? Dylan Raiola at Nebraska, how is he going to look? Is he going to start as a true freshman, big 5-star recruit, the biggest recruit Nebraska's had in a while? For me, I love Ohio State. I think they'll win this conference. I think Oregon's going to put up a big fight, as well as Penn State. What are your thoughts for the Big Ten?
Yes, I agree, Justin. The Big Four, I think, Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, and Penn State, I think, are all going to make the playoffs. Again, it's going to be stacked up with SEC and Big Ten, and I think all four of those will get it. And then SC, I think, probably get that first bid there. They got to play in that Pac-10 legacy where all the bowls that the Pac-10 was tied to. They'll probably get one of the first picks there. And that but I don't think they'll get 5 teams, but 4. They all look really strong. Iowa's pretty good. Of course, it's their defense that carries them, and Wisconsin, another one in there to be this top 7, I would say. But again, the Big Four are going to go to the playoffs. Pretty sure Oregon's loaded as they always are, and of course Michigan's still really tough. And Penn State always fields really strong teams. So it's just a matter of where it is, although Ohio State is kind of the one that's going to be the likely team going to the Rose Bowl this year, waiting for the playing game coming in earlier, like I mentioned. So that's probably what the lineup is, the Big Ten.
Yeah, so some games to watch for the Big Ten. Texas will be going to the Big House and playing Michigan September 7th. Ohio State is going to Eugene and playing Oregon October 12th. That'll be a big matchup to kind of set the stage for who's going to win the Big Ten pretty much. Oregon's going to go to the Big House in November and play Michigan. Ohio State and Penn State, a huge rivalry game. Obviously, the big game is Michigan playing at Ohio State at the end of November, and then Notre Dame's playing at the Coliseum at USC on November 30th. That end of November is just a bunch of games, as we'll get to. But, yeah, I think for the Big Ten, Ohio State, they have a stacked roster. I definitely can see them being in the playoff, if not winning the whole thing. And as I say that, moving on to the Big 12, now a 16-team conference with the additions of some of the Pac-12 schools. Oklahoma State, Ollie Gordon, he could definitely be in the contention for a Heisman winner. He's their star running back. Utah, Cam Rising is back for another season. They had a bit of a down season last year, but a lot of it was because of injury. Kyle Whittingham is a great coach, and I definitely can see Utah winning the Big 12. Kansas, they have a star quarterback, and they're riding the success of last season that they had before he got injured. Kansas State, they have a good quarterback as well, Avery Johnson. It'll be fun to see what they can do in the Big 12. And then Arizona, as we've alluded to in our preview earlier in the summer, we're going to try to compete in year one. Fafita and T-Mac, the dynamic duo of the Big 12. We'll see what Brendan can do in his first year. UCF will be in the race as well. They got a transfer from Arkansas, KJ Jefferson. And Colorado we'll get to a little bit later in terms of what their season will kind of look like. Can they make a bowl? Can they make a bit of a splash in the Big 12? I'm not sure they can win it just yet. I think they'll need a little bit more for Coach Prime to build up. But what is kind of your outlook for this Big 12 season coming up?
This is really something because I got like 8 or 9 teams in there. You got, of course, Oklahoma State, Utah, the Kansas schools, and Arizona are the 5 favorites. But again, Iowa State, West Virginia, Texas Tech, UCF, and that are all really strong teams. So again, likely only one of them is going to make the playoffs, so it's going to really be competitive, especially trying to get those top 2 spots and play for the title. Of course, Utah's got the Cam Rising coming back. He's in his 7th year, and they're expecting a big year out of them. A lot of them are picking them. People are picking Utah to win, Oklahoma State to win. Not many picking, and Kansas State's another one. Not many picking KU and Arizona of the Big 5. But again, either of those can go. And of course, Iowa State, Matt Campbell's always got a good team in Ames. And West Virginia's pretty good too. So, and then Tech, always tough. So again, and then UCF down there in Orlando is really good. So it's going to be hard to tell how it pans out. Again, it could come down. It's probably going to come down to a tiebreaker we discussed earlier as to who gets to go. Because it's possible 4 teams could tie for first. It's that tough. So just whatever happens. And it should be one of the most exciting races in a long time, especially with so many teams, new teams and that. There's excellent. There's like 8 really good quarterbacks in the Big 12. They are loaded, so it could get really exciting for the Big 12.
Yeah, I think for the Big 12, I bet they're really happy that it's a 12-team playoff, because I think for this Big 12 conference, there could be the most parity, and with that, the biggest opportunity for them all to beat each other out. I think the champion of this conference, it'll be tough to go undefeated in this conference for sure. I think it could be similar to the Pac-12, how they all beat each other out in previous years. I think it'll definitely be something close to that. Some big games to look forward to. The Cy-Hawk Bowl, Iowa State is playing Iowa September 7th. Arizona's going to Manhattan, Kansas, and playing Kansas State September 13th. We'll be at that game. That'll be a really fun environment. Utah's going to Stillwater and playing Oklahoma State September 21st. Arizona's traveling to Utah after a bye week and playing at Utah September 28th. That same day, Oklahoma State's going to Manhattan and playing Kansas State. And then Kansas is going to Manhattan as well and playing Kansas State October 26th. So those are some games to look forward to. For me, my heart wants to pick Arizona to win the Big 12, but my head is saying Utah. I just think Kyle Whittingham, he's had a lot of success when the team isn't full of injuries. So if I had to make a distinct pick, I would have to go Utah. What do you have for Big 12?
Actually, yes. I'm lowballing Arizona deliberately because I don't want to be disappointed. I would rather have them come in low. I predicted them low last year that they would go to the Jimmy Kimmel LA Bowl, and they made it all the way to the Alamo Bowl. So I like to go in low, so I'm not disappointed, and I'll have them 5th. Out of the 5 teams, 5th. And again, probably make one of those Pac-10 bowls like the Vegas or the Holiday Bowl, something like that. Again, if they do squeeze into the playoffs, it would really be exciting. But again, Utah is so tough, and Oklahoma State is. I mean, Mike Gundy always has a good team, and both the Sunflower schools are really good there in Kansas. And then, of course, we don't play Iowa State this year. We've got West Virginia at home and Tech at home too, but they're all tough. So, and then UCF and Orlando, it's going to be tough to do it. So I'll go lowball them deliberately for that reason.
And then for the last conference that we'll look at today, the SEC 16-team league, a bit of a super conference now with Oklahoma and Texas. Georgia, Carson Beck, a Heisman favorite. They got a talented team, obviously, per usual. Kirby Smart's got a great staff. Texas, Quinn Ewers is back for another season under Steve Sarkisian. Ole Miss, after a great end of the year, in my opinion, a Peach Bowl win against Penn State. Jackson Dart, Lane Kiffin. Alabama, how is DeBoer going to look in his first season? Missouri, are they going to be able to keep up the success that they had last year? Brady Cook, Luther Burden back for year 2, that dynamic duo. LSU, Tennessee, how are they going to be able to adapt to new quarterbacks in town? Obviously, I think this is the toughest conference along with the Big 12. What do you think so far for the SEC looking ahead?
It is really going to be tough as always. They've won like the most national championships recently. They have the strongest reputation. Georgia appears to be the best. Texas is really strong. Ole Miss is pretty strong too. They're picking them high. Of course, Alabama with a new coach, but DeBoer has like an 89% winning percentage out where he's coached. He's really won big everywhere he goes. So Alabama should be right up there. Mizzou, LSU, and Tennessee are the 7 teams I think that are really going to make some noise, and I'm sure they'll get 4 bids again, just like the Big Ten. So again, they're so tough they'll probably get 4, and probably Georgia will play for the national championship against probably Ohio State is who I'm predicting. It's going to be so tough in those divisions, but it's hard to tell the way the rankings are and how it all lines up to see if any other teams can squeeze in. But the SEC is going to be well represented. They are very strong.
Yeah, so for some games to watch in that conference, as I mentioned, Clemson and Georgia in week 1. Miami is going to the Swamp and playing the University of Florida. It's the first Florida home game hosting Miami since 2008, so that'll be a fun rivalry to watch in the Swamp. It's been a while. Tennessee's going to Oklahoma. Georgia's going to Bama, which will be a huge rivalry game. It always is, September 28th. Texas OU, Big 12 showdown in the SEC now, October 12th. You love to see it. Last year, Oklahoma won on basically the last play of the game. It's always a fun Red River showdown. Georgia's going at Texas in October. Georgia's playing Florida in November. Georgia's going to Ole Miss in November as well the next week, so Georgia's schedule is stacked. The first matchup since 2011, Texas is going to College Station and playing Texas A&M November 30th. On that same day, Alabama's hosting Auburn. Florida is going to Florida State. So at the end of November, it's going to be great. I always love rivalry week. I have Georgia winning the SEC. I think you do as well.
Yes.
So now, to wrap up, I thought we would look at the playoff and the Heisman candidates who we think we'll have. So for the playoff, I think Georgia will be in there in the Final Four at least. I thought we would just look at the Final Four who we think will be in that. I think Georgia, Ohio State, the most talented team in the nation in my opinion. I think Texas will be back in the Final Four much like last season. And then I think just for a sleeper pick, I love Ole Miss. I love Lane Kiffin, Jackson Dart. I think experience will be important in the college football playoff, just moving ahead and trying to advance in each round. And what do you have for the Final Four?
That's interesting, Justin, because you'll have the Big 12 team getting knocked out in that second round then, having Texas in there. And, well, of course, Ohio State's Big 10. You got Georgia. You got an SEC team. And then you're going to have the Peach Bowl team, the ACC team, get beat out too. So, again, both in those preliminary rounds will go all the way to get to the Final Four based on with you're getting Ole Miss and Texas. As far as that goes, as the Final Four on that, of course, Georgia and Ohio State, I think, are clearly 2 picks. And I think that the other 2 could possibly be Oregon, could possibly be one of them. And another one could be, let's go with Alabama possibly. Could be, again, DeBoer could field a strong team. So I think maybe Oregon and Alabama, along with Georgia and Ohio State, they should win their preliminary games there. Seeded pretty high. Oregon could probably be the 5 seed or 6 seed, and they can go through and that. So that's probably my Final Four. Again, really good teams.
For the Heisman candidates, I don't really know if I have a prediction of who's going to win it just yet, but I do think the top 4 to keep an eye on. Carson Beck, as I mentioned, for Georgia. If they go undefeated, he'll be definitely in contention. Dillon Gabriel, I think, will put up a bunch of stats for Oregon. He's a classic Oregon quarterback, very athletic. He's going to throw the ball a bunch. Quinn Ewers for Texas. nothing really to say. He's a great quarterback. Has another year under his belt in the Sarkisian scheme. Jalen Milroe, he really came onto his own in Alabama to end the season. And then Jackson Dart, I think, is another candidate to look at. And then hopefully I think Noah Fafita can have some success. We might not necessarily need to go undefeated to get some recognition, but I hope we can at least win enough games to get him in contention. I think it just all depends on team success and how they play in big games, because as you know, every year there's always a Heisman moment that the Heisman winner eventually has in the season. So I thought to end the show today, we can play a little game. So the game is called How Many Games? And the first question I have for you is, how many games will Colorado win?
Looking at their schedule, they're predicted to be like 11th or 12th or so in the Big 12 in that, and they were 4-8 last year. I would see a little improvement going to 5-7 this year. Again, it's a strong league, but it's tough, and they possibly could squeeze if they can get one more win. Then they could get one of those bowls at the bottom there. Hopefully, squeeze a bowl for Colorado. But again, Dion maybe pull 5-7 is what I'm saying.
I think 5-7 as well. I think at most I can see them winning 7, maybe 8 games, but I just don't think it'll be Colorado wins the Big 12 and goes 10-2 just yet. I think they're still in the rebuilding stage. Colorado was nothing a couple years ago until Coach Prime got there. Next up, how many games will Oklahoma win?
Oh, wow. And, of course, the SEC is really loaded in that, but they are only 16-10 the last few seasons, surprisingly. It's really tough. I'll go with 8-4 on Oklahoma. They were finished 12th in the nation, and if they had been in the playoffs last year, they would have gotten bumped because that 12th place team would have to give away to this G5 person or team. So 8-4, I'm guessing. Of course, the SEC is so rugged they could drop maybe to 6-6 possibly, but I think 8-4. I think possibly LU could do it.
Yeah, I'll have to go 7-5 for my prediction, but I do think their ceiling is about an 8-4 team. I just think their staff and their team is just going to have to get used to the SEC a little bit more. I think Texas is a little bit more well-equipped for the SEC. And then for the next team that we'll look at, along with OU, they have a really tough schedule. And this question will be, how many games do you think the University of Florida will win?
This is also a real challenge. Of course, they mentioned you had Miami. They hadn't played Miami for years. They got them on the schedule. Miami's got a really good team. So, again, it's so rugged there in the SEC. It's probably going to be 5-7. It's going to be tough. And then if they can possibly get warm, they squeeze a bowl too. But it's going to be tough in that rugged SEC.
Yeah, this morning I saw Florida, and why I kind of wanted to do this segment. Their over-under for wins in this season is 4.5. Which, I mean, you don't really think of Florida as like a super powerhouse for football. I mean, they were in the early 2000s, but I mean, 4.5 wins, like that just kind of surprised me. I think they'll be just above that at 5-7, but I really can't see them like winning 3 or 4 games just because it's such a tough schedule, and they're one of their biggest offseason acquisitions was DJ Lagway, a freshman quarterback. So, I mean, it'll kind of take time for him to get used to the system and get used to the speed of the college game. So I think Florida will be good just in a couple years when he's an upperclassman. And then for the last question of this segment, how many games until we see Arch Manning, the illustrious backup quarterback for Texas, how many games until we see him?
They're playing, I believe it's Colorado State the first game, right, in that. And he'll play in the first game to do that, because if they get a substantial lead, they can put him right in.
Yeah, I think for me, my answer was either the first or the third game. I think if it's a blowout, he's going to play. I don't think I see him playing week 2 at the Big House against Michigan, just because I think it'll be a really close game, and maybe we'll see him not week 1 or week 2, but I definitely think we'll see him in week 3 when they play UTSA, just because I think Texas is going to win those games pretty mightily. I guess the last game, while we're mentioning it, who do you think is going to win that game week 2 with Texas going to the Big House at Michigan?
Oh, that's going to be like a prelude to a playoff. It's basically like a playoff game. And I'm going to go with Michigan. Of course, in the Big House, it's really tough for a road team to come in there, even in September. So, but it'll be close. So Texas did beat Alabama. Didn't they beat them on the road last year in Tuscaloosa?
Yeah, because Alabama they were struggling a little bit at the beginning of the year.
Yeah. So I would go Michigan, but it'll be a close game again because of home field. But of course, Texas is loaded, so it's probably going to be a prelude to a preview to a playoff game. They could play in the playoffs. So very, very good question, but I'll go Michigan in a close one.
Yeah, I think just to close, I'm really excited that there's a 12-team playoff. I think some of the best times of the year is the NFL playoffs with all the teams. All the fans think they have an opportunity to win. And with college football, I think with the playoff, it was a good introduction for the time in 2014. But I think now with all the same teams that were making it, the Clemsons, the Alabamas, the Georgias, now with this 12-team playoff, we can the fans of the teams not of the powerhouse universities, they can at least feel like they have a little bit of a chance. Like if you're a group of 5 fan, like you mentioned, of like Memphis or Appalachian State, you're like, hey, we can gun for the 12 seed. So I think the 12-team playoff, I think it was long awaited. I'm glad that it's finally here. College football is almost here. I can't wait, especially with the new video game coming out this week. I'm really excited to get my hands on that and play it. But any closing thoughts for this upcoming college football season?
Well, of course, I want to show a little love to the G5 teams, like you just mentioned, in that they have had some notable victories. You know, I think it was Troy that beat LSU one time in Baton Rouge. So they have pulled off some big wins, and that Sun Belt has made the notoriety. And of course, Coastal Carolina's had some really good teams there. Of course, they're turquoise field in that in Conway there. So it's kind of fun following these teams. James Madison's come up. They were ranked. Both their football and basketball teams are ranked. So they're another one. Of course, they're in App State's division. They're in the East. And then Louisiana. Texas State's really come up too. And they're going to be one of the leaders. And of course, in the Mountain West, they're arguably the strongest of the teams, but they kind of beat each other out for the playoff spot. And with UNLV coming up, they weren't very good, but they're good now. And they play in that Dome Stadium there west of the Strip there, where the Raiders play, the Allegiant Stadium. Air Force always had strong teams there. And Fresno State's a good team. So Mountain West will be really competitive, a lot of good games there. And then, of course, the MAC, of course, is split in 2 divisions. Of course, Northern Illinois made some noise. Toledo has 2. And Bowling Green and Miami of Ohio are some of the leaders there. And they'll probably have some really good games there in the Midwest, there in the Mid-American Conference. And, of course, Conference USA, Liberty's really come up the last few years. And Western Kentucky looks pretty good. And then Jacksonville State, they're actually in Alabama. They have a pretty good team. And then they even have New Mexico State listed 4th. So out there in Las Cruces, New Mexico, the westernmost team in Conference USA, maybe they can make some noise too. And then, of course, the American Memphis is getting a lot of pub and be the team that represents the G5. Tulane, of course, went last year. South Florida is popping up on the radar screen. They're predicted 3rd. And then Texas San Antonio's really built up their program in the last when they started the program there. Of course, they play in the Alamo Dome, and that's helped their recruiting and that, playing a big stadium like that. And they're predicted 4th. So trying to show a lot of love to the G5 schools and see how they do. And maybe they'd have to really play good to beat a number 5 seed going up against like a 13-1 team. So see how they do. I'm sure they're going to have a lot of competitive games, but I want to show some love to the G5 schools.
Yeah, I think this story of this college football season it'll be a good one. And I think the opening chapter with Colorado losing to North Dakota State in week 1, that'll start off the season real good. And then at the end of the season, when Jed Fish in Washington goes 7-5, and he's sad that Arizona wins the Big 12, I think that'll be a sweet victory for us Arizona fans to see Washington down in the dumps in the Big 10. But that'll do it for us. Thank you guys for watching, and until next time.
Thank you.